There is a food in your kitchen right now, probably in your pantry, possibly sitting on your breakfast table, that oncologists have been quietly concerned about for over a decade. It does not taste dangerous. It does not look dangerous. And depending on the brand, it might even carry a heart-healthy or whole grain label on the front of the package. But for adults over 60, this food does something inside the body that most people are never told about. It quietly, systematically, and continuously feeds cancer cells. And most seniors are eating it every single day. I'm Dr. Hayes Anderson, and after 22 years in senior health, I've seen firsthand what happens when the connection between diet and cancer risk goes unaddressed and unexplained. Promise, stakes. By the end of this video, you are going to know exactly what this food is, why it becomes so much more dangerous after 60, and the 5 specific biological pathways through which it helps cancer cells grow. I'll also give you a clear, practical action plan to reduce your exposure starting today without upending your entire life. But I need you to stay with me, because mechanism number 3 is the one that surprises people most. It is also the one that most oncologists never have time to explain. Here is something that should be common knowledge, but almost never comes up in a routine appointment. Cancer cells are not random invaders that appear without warning. They are cells that have been given an environment to grow. And for decades, a field called nutritional oncology, which studies the relationship between what we eat and how cancer behaves, has been accumulating research that most patients never hear about. Why? Because a 15-minute appointment doesn't allow time for it. Because oncologists specialize in treating cancer that already exists, not in explaining the dietary conditions that help it take hold. And because the processed food industry has spent enormous resources making sure this connection stays complicated and confusing in the public conversation. This is not your fault. You were never given a clear picture. So today I'm going to give you one. The food at the center of this conversation is refined sugar, specifically the added processed sugar found in breakfast cereals, bread, flavored yogurts, packaged crackers, granola bars, fruit juices, and hundreds of other products that line the shelves of every grocery store. And here is why it matters far more after 60 than it ever did before. 1. The Warburg effect, cancer's private fuel line. In 1931, a German physiologist named Otto Warburg won the Nobel Prize for a discovery about cancer cells that is still not widely taught outside of oncology. He found that cancer cells consume glucose, sugar, at a rate 10 to 70 times higher than normal, healthy cells. They don't use it the same way your other cells do. They ferment it. They burn through it rapidly to fuel their own replication. This is called the Warburg effect, and it is one of the most well-established findings in all of cancer biology. What this means in practical terms is that every time you send a surge of sugar into your bloodstream, from a bowl of cereal, a slice of white bread, a glass of orange juice, a flavored yogurt, you are, in a very literal sense, fueling a system that cancer cells exploit preferentially. Healthy cells can use fat for energy. Most cancer cells cannot do this efficiently. They are glucose dependent. They are waiting for the delivery. And after 60, with the metabolic changes that come with age, blood sugar spikes become harder for the body to control and last significantly longer. Let me tell you about Mildred. She was 74 years old, still active, and considered herself a careful, health-conscious eater. Every morning she had oatmeal with a drizzle of honey and a glass of orange juice. Mid-morning, a handful of whole grain crackers. Lunch was a turkey sandwich on whole wheat bread. She felt good about those choices. What Mildred did not know was that her daily diet was sending her blood sugar through a series of rapid spikes that her aging pancreas was struggling to manage. She was not diabetic, but she was maintaining a metabolic pattern that oncologists recognize and that her doctor never flagged. 2. The insulin cascade, the growth signal nobody warned you about. When you eat refined sugar or high glycemic processed foods, your pancreas releases insulin to manage the resulting blood glucose spike. That is a normal, necessary response. But here is the part most people never hear. Insulin is also a powerful growth-promoting hormone, and elevated insulin levels trigger the release of another compound called insulin-like growth factor 1, IGF-1. In healthy amounts, IGF-1 supports normal tissue maintenance. But when insulin stays chronically elevated from repeated sugar intake, IGF-1 levels stay elevated as well. And research has linked persistently high IGF-1 to increased proliferation of cancer cells in the breast, colon, prostate, and pancreas. After 60, this problem compounds. Insulin sensitivity tends to decline with age, which means the body often needs to produce more insulin to do the same job. More insulin means more IGF-1. More IGF-1 means a cellular environment that is more receptive to cancer growth. And the average senior diet, with its reliance on packaged breads, sweetened cereals, low-fat flavored products, and convenience snacks, keeps that insulin response activated far more often than most people realize. Stay with me because what comes next changes how you think about inflammation entirely. 3. Chronic inflammation, the soil where cancer grows. Inflammation is not inherently dangerous. Acute inflammation, the kind that happens when you sprain an ankle or fight off a cold, is how your body heals. But chronic, low-grade inflammation is a different animal entirely. It is persistent, it is silent, and it creates an internal environment that is consistently linked to cancer risk across multiple tumor types. Refined sugar and ultra-processed foods are among the most potent drivers of chronic inflammation we know of. They activate pro-inflammatory signaling pathways, raise levels of C-reactive protein, and promote the release of chemical messengers that keep the immune system in a state of sustained, low-level alarm. Over months and years, this inflammatory environment damages DNA, impairs normal cellular repair mechanisms, and creates the conditions oncologists describe as the soil where cancer seeds take root. Let me tell you about Leon. He was 71, retired, and had been dealing with what his doctor called mild joint inflammation for years. He took an over-the-counter anti-inflammatory almost daily and gave it little additional thought. What Leon had never been told was that the flavored trail mix he had every afternoon, loaded with yogurt chips, dried cranberries, and sweetened coconut flakes, and the instant oatmeal packets he made every morning, were consistently adding inflammatory pressure to a system already under stress. When his C-reactive protein was finally tested, it was significantly elevated. His doctor treated the inflammation. No one asked what might be causing it. 4. Suppressed immune surveillance, when the guard falls asleep. Your immune system runs a continuous internal patrol. It identifies abnormal cells, cells with damaged DNA, cells behaving outside normal parameters, and eliminates them before they can become a problem. This process is called immune surveillance, and it is one of your body's most fundamental built-in defenses against cancer. Most abnormal cells that form in the body are quietly destroyed by this system before you ever know they existed. Research has shown that high sugar consumption suppresses immune function in measurable ways. A significant glucose load can reduce the ability of neutrophils, a critical class of white blood cells, to recognize and destroy abnormal cells. And this suppression begins within minutes of a blood sugar spike and can persist for several hours. After 60, immune surveillance is already less robust than it was at 40. A diet high in refined sugar on top of that age-related decline creates a pattern where abnormal cells have a wider window of survival than they should. This is the mechanism I want you to sit with for a moment, because it answers a question many people have. Why does cancer risk increase so sharply after 60? Age is part of the answer, but so is the cumulative effect of decades of a high-sugar diet progressively weakening the system that was supposed to catch and eliminate cancer cells early. 5. Gut microbiome disruption, the final piece of the puzzle. Your gut microbiome, the vast, diverse community of bacteria living in your digestive tract, plays a direct role in immune regulation, inflammation control, and the metabolism of compounds that can either promote or suppress tumor activity. A healthy microbiome produces short-chain fatty acids that protect the cells lining your colon, regulate immune activity throughout the body, and help maintain the integrity of the gut wall itself. Refined sugar and processed foods feed the harmful bacteria in the gut while starving the beneficial ones. Over time, this creates a state called dysbiosis, an imbalance in the gut ecosystem that has been linked in multiple studies to increased colorectal cancer risk, and more broadly to the kind of systemic inflammation we discussed in Mechanism 3. After 60, the microbiome is already more vulnerable to disruption than it was in younger years. A diet consistently high in added sugar accelerates that vulnerability significantly. Irene was 68 when her oncologist asked a question she had never been asked before during any of her medical appointments. He asked what her daily diet looked like. She had been diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer. She was grateful it had been caught, but she was not prepared for what came next. Her oncologist explained that her long-standing dietary pattern, heavy in processed carbohydrates, added sugars, and convenience foods, had very likely been suppressing the immune response that should have been identifying abnormal cells earlier. He was careful not to blame her. She was careful not to fall apart in the office. But she told me later that she wished someone had asked that question 20 years before, because she would have changed. If someone had explained the mechanisms clearly, she would have changed. I want to be very clear about something. I am not telling you any of this to frighten you. I am telling you this because you deserve to understand what is actually happening inside your body and why the food choices you make each day matter more at 60 and 70 than they did at 30. None of these 5 mechanisms are forces you cannot influence. They are biological processes that respond to what you eat. The environment that cancer needs to grow is not fixed. You have significant power over it, and that power starts at your next meal. Actionable takeaway. So here is what this looks like in practice. 5 steps you can begin today without turning your entire life upside down. First, read the label for added sugar on every packaged food you buy. Anything above 5 grams of added sugar per serving deserves a second look. 10 grams or more is high for a senior eating with cancer prevention in mind. Second, replace your morning refined carbohydrate with protein and healthy fat. Eggs with vegetables instead of cereal. Plain Greek yogurt with no added sugar instead of a flavored variety. This single swap reduces your morning glucose spike dramatically. Third, swap your daily juice for whole fruit. The fiber in whole fruit slows glucose absorption significantly. Juice removes that fiber entirely and sends sugar directly into your bloodstream. A glass of orange juice spikes blood sugar faster than many people realize. Fourth, add 1 serving of fiber-rich vegetables to every single meal. Fiber feeds beneficial gut bacteria, reduces inflammation, and slows sugar absorption simultaneously. It is one of the most efficient moves you can make for gut health. Fifth, ask your doctor about testing your fasting insulin level and your C-reactive protein at your next visit. These two numbers together tell a story that a standard metabolic panel often misses. They reveal your inflammatory burden and your insulin sensitivity, both of which are directly relevant to your cancer risk.